3 years of failure had taught the galaxy one simple truth: some creatures could not be broken. The Crimson Stormwing proved this lesson daily, and today would be no different. Ruth pressed her face against the transport window, watching the massive breeding station grow larger as their ship approached. High Peak Station rotated slowly in the darkness, its lights blinking like stars against the metal surface. She had heard stories about this place during the long journey from Earth. Every species in the Council kept their most valuable animals here, including the legendary space dragons that could fly between worlds carrying riders on their backs. The other passengers ignored the view. Most were farmers like Ruth, heading to colony worlds after losing their lands to the big corporations. Ruth had owned a small farm in Kansas before the seizure notice arrived. Now she owned nothing except a single bag of clothes and a ticket to some distant planet she had never heard of. The docking process took an hour. Ruth felt the gentle bump as their transport connected to the station. Around her, people gathered their belongings and prepared to disembark for the scheduled rest stop. They would have 6 hours here before continuing their journey. Ruth followed the crowd through narrow corridors into the main hub. The station was bigger inside than she had imagined. Aliens of every shape and size moved through the wide spaces. 4-armed creatures carried cargo. Tall beings with translucent skin spoke in musical tones. Small, fuzzy animals scurried between legs, apparently working as cleaners. A young station worker noticed Ruth staring at everything. The girl had blue skin and kind eyes. She wore a name tag that read Pip in several languages. "First time off Earth?" Pip asked in perfect English. Ruth nodded. "First time seeing real aliens, too." "Everything is so different," Pip smiled. "Want to see something really amazing? I can show you the Stormwings if we're quick. My shift just ended. The space dragons. Really? Follow me. Just stay quiet and don't tell anyone I brought you. Tourists aren't supposed to go to the breeding cells." They walked through service corridors away from the main hub. Pip swiped her security card at several doors. Finally, they entered a small observation room with a thick glass wall. Beyond the glass stretched an enormous chamber, at least 200 feet tall and wide enough to fit several houses. In the center of the chamber, a dragon paced. Ruth had seen pictures, but they had not prepared her for the reality. The creature was as large as a passenger jet, covered in scales that shifted from deep red to bright crimson depending on how the light hit them. 2 massive wings folded against her sides. Her tail, thick as a tree trunk, swept back and forth as she walked. But what struck Ruth most were the eyes. They watched everything with clear intelligence, calculating and aware. "That's the problem, Dragon," Pip whispered. "Nobody can ride her. She's hurt or killed every trainer who tried. 23 different species have sent their best handlers. All failed. The Council wants to put her in permanent isolation next week, maybe even terminate her." Ruth watched the dragon stop and stare at a door where workers in protective suits were guiding hovering platforms loaded with meat. The workers kept their distance, using long poles to push the food into the cell. The dragon looked at the meat but did not move toward it. "Why isn't she eating?" Ruth asked. "Stormwings are proud. They only eat what they earn through work or hunting. She won't accept food she didn't work for, even if she's starving. See those scars on her legs? From the restraints they used during training attempts. She fought so hard she damaged herself." Ruth felt something tighten in her chest. She knew what it felt like to be trapped, to have choices taken away, to be treated like property instead of a person. When the bank had seized her farm, the officers had spoken about her as if she wasn't there, discussing her future while she stood in her own kitchen. "Can I get closer?" Ruth asked. Pip looked worried. "The observation deck is as close as anyone gets now. She's too dangerous. I just want to talk to her." "Talk to her? She's an animal. Well, a smart animal, but still. She doesn't look like an animal to me. She looks like someone in prison." Before Pip could respond, Ruth walked to the door leading into the chamber. A control panel blinked red, indicating the cell was locked. Pip rushed over. "You can't go in there. It's against every safety protocol. I could lose my job." Ruth turned to face the young alien. "Then don't open it. I'll take full responsibility. But I need to talk to her, please." Something in Ruth's voice made Pip hesitate. The blue-skinned girl looked at Ruth, then at the dragon, then back at Ruth. "If you die, they'll blame me anyway," Pip said quietly. She pressed her hand to the scanner. The door beeped and slid open. The sound caught the dragon's attention immediately. Her massive head swung toward the observation deck. Ruth saw those intelligent eyes focus on her with laser precision. Every muscle in the dragon's body tensed. Ruth stepped through the doorway into the cell. The space felt even larger from inside, and the dragon looked impossibly huge. The creature could kill her with a single swipe of those claws or a blast of the fire that Stormwings were famous for. Ruth walked forward slowly, counting her steps. At 20 paces, she stopped and sat down on the cold metal floor. She made herself small, tucking her legs under her. "Hello," Ruth said in a normal voice, speaking English because it was the only language she knew well. "My name is Ruth. I know you probably can't understand me, but I wanted to ask you something. Is it okay if I'm here? I don't want to bother you if you'd rather be alone." The dragon stared at her for a long moment. Then slowly the creature sat back on her haunches, wings settling into a relaxed position. She tilted her head slightly, studying this small human who had just asked permission to share her space. In the observation deck, Pip grabbed the emergency communicator, her hand shaking. But she did not press the alert button. Something impossible was happening, and she needed to see where it would lead. Silence filled the enormous cell like water filling a cup. Ruth stayed sitting on the floor while the dragon watched her with eyes that seemed to look straight through skin and bone into something deeper. Minutes passed. Ruth did not move or speak again. She had learned patience on the farm, waiting for seeds to sprout, for animals to trust her, for storms to pass. Some things could not be rushed. The dragon shifted her weight. The movement made the floor tremble slightly. Those massive wings adjusted, and Ruth noticed scars along the leading edges where restraints had cut into the delicate membrane. More scars crossed the dragon's chest and legs. This creature had been hurt many times by many different beings. Finally, the dragon lowered her head until it was level with Ruth's position. At this distance, Ruth could see her own reflection in those huge eyes. The dragon made a sound, low and rumbling like distant thunder. It was not threatening. It sounded almost like a question. "I wish I could understand you properly," Ruth said softly, "but I think you're asking why I'm here. Honestly, I'm not completely sure myself. I saw you pacing and you looked so angry and sad at the same time. I know that feeling. I've been angry and sad for months now." The dragon blinked slowly. Ruth took it as encouragement to continue. "I had a farm back on Earth. Small place, just me and some chickens in a big garden. It wasn't much, but it was mine. Then the bank said I owed money I didn't have. They took everything. Told me I should be grateful they were giving me a spot on a colony ship, like they were doing me a favor by taking my whole life away." Ruth surprised herself by feeling tears on her cheeks. She wiped them away quickly. "Sorry, I didn't come here to complain about my problems. You've got enough of your own. Pip said they've been trying to train you for 3 years, that you've never accepted a rider. Is that because you don't want to carry people, or because nobody ever asked if you wanted to?" The dragon made another sound, deeper this time. Her tail swept across the floor in a deliberate arc. Ruth felt certain it meant something, but she did not know what. Behind them, the door opened. Ruth turned to see Pip gesturing frantically. A tall figure with 4 arms stood beside her, looking extremely unhappy. The alien wore a commander's insignia on his uniform. "You need to leave the cell immediately," the commander said in heavily accented English. "You are in extreme danger and violating multiple safety regulations." Ruth started to stand, but the dragon moved faster. One massive wing extended, creating a barrier between Ruth and the doorway. The message was clear. The dragon did not want the human to leave. The commander's 4 arms crossed over his chest. "I am Commander Brace. This station is my responsibility. That creature has killed 2 handlers and seriously injured 11 others. You will exit the cell now, or I will have you removed by security." "She doesn't want me to go," Ruth said. "I do not care what it wants. You are leaving. Could you please ask what she wants? You have translators here, right? Technology that lets different species understand each other?" Brace looked confused by the question. "The dragon has translation implants. She can understand all council languages. But we do not negotiate with breeding stock." "Breeding stock?" Ruth felt anger rise in her chest. "She's intelligent. She understands everything you're saying. You just called her breeding stock right in front of her. It is the correct terminology. How would you like being called breeding stock?" Brace's face changed color slightly. Ruth guessed she had insulted him, but she did not care. She turned away from the door and looked at the dragon again. "I'm sorry they talk about you like that. It's not right. You're not property. You're a person, just a different kind of person than me." The dragon pulled her wing back slowly. Ruth stood and walked toward the commander, who watched her approach with all 4 hands now resting on various weapons on his belt. I'll leave, Ruth said when she reached the doorway. But I want to come back tomorrow. I want to visit her again. As a friend, not a trainer. Impossible. You are a civilian passenger. You have no clearance for the breeding cells. Then give me clearance, please. Brace stared at her for a long moment. Why do you care about this creature? You have no connection to it. You are not a handler or researcher. You are a farmer being relocated to Colony World. This does not concern you. Ruth looked back at the dragon, who was watching the conversation intently. Maybe that's exactly why I care. Because I'm nobody important. Because I know what it's like when important people make decisions about your life without asking what you want. Because she looks at me and I can see she's not just angry, she's lonely. And I understand lonely. The commander was quiet for a moment. Then he made a gesture Ruth did not recognize. You may return tomorrow for 1 hour. Pip will escort you. But if the creature shows any aggression, you will leave immediately. Understood? Understood. Thank you, Commander. Ruth turned back to the cell one more time. The dragon was sitting up straight, head held high. Ruth raised her hand in a small wave. I'll see you tomorrow, if that's okay with you. The dragon dipped her head forward in what looked unmistakably like a nod. As Pip led Ruth back through the corridors, the young alien could not stop talking. That was incredible. Nobody has ever gotten her to calm down like that. And she protected you. Did you see how she put her wing between you and the commander? I've never seen her do anything except attack or retreat. What did you say to her? Nothing special. I just talked to her like she was a person. Because she is, but she's a dragon. So? You're blue and have gills on your neck. I'm pink and have hair all over my head. That commander has 4 arms. We're all different, but we're all people. Why would dragons be different? Pip thought about this as they walked. Nobody ever explained it that way before. Ruth smiled. Sometimes humans are good at seeing the obvious things that everyone else misses. We're not smarter. We just come at problems from weird angles. They reached the main hub where the other passengers were eating at various food stations. Ruth realized she was hungry, but more than that, she felt something she had not felt in months. She felt like maybe she had found a purpose in this strange new life among the stars. Dawn on a space station meant nothing except the artificial lights brightening on schedule. Ruth had barely slept, sharing a cramped passenger quarters with 5 other colonists who snored in various pitches and volumes. She dressed quickly and found Pip waiting outside the quarters exactly at the agreed time. They walked through the station in comfortable silence. Early shift workers moved past them, beginning their daily tasks. Ruth noticed more aliens staring at her than yesterday. Word had apparently spread about the human who entered the dangerous dragon cell and survived. When they reached the observation deck, Ruth stopped in surprise. Commander Brace stood at the window, watching the dragon. He turned when they entered. The transport is delayed again, Brace said without greeting. Engine problems. You have 3 more days here. I have decided to allow you daily visits with the Stormwing. But we will monitor everything. Recording devices will capture your interactions for the Council to review. That's fine. Thank you. Do not thank me. I am doing this because in 30 years of managing this station, I have never seen that creature respond positively to anyone. If you have discovered some method we missed, the Council needs to know. Now go. She has been watching this door since the shift change. Ruth looked through the glass. The dragon stood facing the observation deck, perfectly still except for her tail, which swayed slowly back and forth. The door opened, and Ruth stepped through. The dragon made a sound that the translation device in the ceiling interpreted as a word in several languages, all meaning roughly the same thing: returned. Ruth walked to the same spot as yesterday and sat down. The dragon approached and settled onto her haunches about 10 feet away. Closer than yesterday. Good morning, Ruth said. I hope you slept well. I didn't sleep much. Too excited about seeing you again, I think. The dragon tilted her head, listening. Pip told me some things about your species last night. She said Stormwings have their own language and culture, that you live in family groups in the wild, flying through space together, hunting on asteroids and small moons. She said you're born knowing how to survive in the void, that your wings can somehow push against nothing and make you move. I don't understand the science, but it sounds beautiful. Freedom to go anywhere in the whole universe. The dragon's eyes closed briefly. When they opened again, Ruth saw something in them she recognized. Grief. You miss it. Flying free, I mean. Being with your family. They took you away from all that, didn't they? Probably when you were young. brought you here and expected you to just accept a new life as a vehicle for other species. The dragon stood and moved to the far wall. She pressed one claw against the metal, dragging it down in a long screech. Then she did it again and again, creating a pattern. Ruth stood and walked closer, studying the marks. They looked deliberate, like symbols or writing. Is this your language? Are you writing something? The dragon made a complex sound, and the translator said, Yes, story. Mine. Ruth felt her breath catch. You can use the translators? You understand me completely? All words. Always. The dragon's voice through the translator was female, deep and resonant. Then why didn't you talk to the trainers? To the handlers? The dragon turned to face her. They never asked. They commanded, demanded, forced, never asked. What do these marks say? My name, Skybreaker who rides the storm between worlds. Too long for most. Call me Storm, Ruth smiled. Storm, that's a good name. Much better than the number they probably gave you here? 7-3 Alpha Prime. The dragon's voice carried clear disgust. That's awful. You're Storm. You should be addressed properly. Do you mind if I call you Storm? You asked. You may use it. They talked for hours. Storm described her capture as a hatchling, barely a year old. She had been taken from her family during a hunt. The traders who caught her sold her to the council breeding program. She had been at High Peak Station for 17 years, most of her life. She had never flown in open space. The flight chamber in the cell was the only sky she knew. Ruth told Storm about Earth, about farms and seasons, about the smell of rain on soil and the way wheat moved in the wind like waves on an ocean. She talked about losing everything and feeling powerless while others decided her future. We are similar, Storm said, both taken from homes, both sent to new places without choice. Yes, both trapped by systems too big to fight. You fight differently than others. You use strange weapons. What weapons? Please, thank you. May I? These words like cracks in walls. Small, but they break stone, Ruth laughed. Politeness as a weapon? I never thought of it that way. My grandmother taught me manners. She said treating people with respect costs nothing but means everything. Wise grandmother. She was. I miss her. Storm moved closer until she sat directly in front of Ruth, close enough to touch. You may touch if you wish. I give permission. Ruth reached out slowly and placed her hand on Storm's snout. The scales felt warm and smooth, each one perfectly formed. She could feel the dragon's breath, steady and strong. Thank you for trusting me, Ruth whispered. Thank you for asking. In the observation deck, Commander Brace watched the monitors in stunned silence. Beside him, Pip was crying quietly, though she could not have explained exactly why. They were witnessing something that should have been impossible. Not just communication between human and dragon, but genuine connection built on mutual respect. Brace pressed the communication button to his office. Send a priority message to the council. Tell them we have a situation that requires immediate attention. The untamable Stormwing has begun speaking. When Ruth finally left the cell 3 hours later, Storm walked with her to the door. Will you return? Storm asked. Every day until my transport leaves. I promise. Good, I have more story to share, and I wish to hear more Earth stories. It's a deal. As the door closed between them, Ruth saw Storm settle into a resting position, wings folded comfortably. The dragon looked peaceful for the first time since arriving at High Peak Station. That night, Storm ate the food provided, earning her meal through the conversation she had shared, the knowledge she had exchanged. In her mind, that was work worth doing. 6 days had changed everything and nothing. Ruth's transport remained grounded with ongoing repairs, giving her unexpected time at High Peak Station. She spent every permitted hour with Storm, their conversations growing deeper and more comfortable. But today felt different as Ruth entered the cell. Today was the 7th day and Storm was moving restlessly around the space. Something troubles you, Ruth said, settling into her usual spot. Storm paced in a wide circle, wings twitching. I show you something, if you accept. What is it? Flight. Real flight, with me, on me. Ruth's heart started beating faster. You want me to ride with you? Not ride. Fly together, partnership, but only if you wish. I ask, not command. Ruth stood up, legs suddenly shaky. She had watched riders with their storm wings on video feeds throughout the station. The bond between dragon and rider was supposed to be sacred, formed through intense training and mutual survival experiences. But those partnerships were built on contracts and obligations. Storm was offering something else entirely. "I would be honored," Ruth said. "But I should tell you, I'm afraid of heights. I never even liked climbing ladders back home. I will keep you safe. You trusted me on ground. Trust me in air." Storm lowered herself, extending one wing to create a ramp. Ruth approached slowly, placing her hands on the warm scales. She climbed carefully onto Storm's back, settling between two ridges that formed a natural seat. There were no harnesses or saddles like the ones she had seen on other Stormwings. Nothing but trust holding her in place. "Hold neck ridges. Grip with legs. I will not make sudden moves. Ready?" "As ready as I'll ever be." Storm began walking toward the center of the flight chamber. The space stretched 500 feet in every direction. Large enough for Stormwings to practice maneuvers, but nothing compared to the open void of space. Ruth felt the powerful muscles moving beneath her, each step precise and controlled. Then Storm's wings opened fully, spanning nearly 60 feet from tip to tip. Ruth gasped at the beauty of them, the way light caught the membranes and made them glow like stained glass. Storm crouched low, then launched upward with explosive force. Ruth yelped and grabbed the neck ridges tighter, feeling the incredible power as they shot toward the ceiling. At the last possible moment, Storm leveled out and banked into a wide turn. The movement felt smooth despite the speed, like riding a wave instead of fighting it. They circled the chamber slowly at first. Ruth forced herself to look down at the floor far below. Her stomach twisted, but she did not let go. Storm was keeping her promise, flying steady and careful. "Faster?" Storm asked. "Okay. Yes. Let's go faster." Storm accelerated, wings beating in a strong rhythm. They dove toward the floor and Ruth felt her stomach lift into her throat. Then they pulled up sharply, climbing again in a spiral that made the walls blur. Ruth laughed, surprise overcoming fear. This was nothing like climbing a ladder. This was something wild and free and utterly magnificent. They flew together for 20 minutes, Storm showing Ruth basic maneuvers and responding to the slight shifts in Ruth's weight. When they finally landed, Ruth was shaking but grinning so wide her face hurt. "That was incredible," Ruth said, sliding down from Storm's back. "I never imagined anything could feel like that. You are natural flyer. Balance good. Fear controlled. We move well together." "Really?" "I barely knew what I was doing." "Exactly. You did not think. You felt, responded, trusted." Ruth walked around to face Storm, looking up at those huge eyes. "Storm, I need to tell you something. My transport leaves tomorrow. The repairs are finally finished. This is our last day together." Storm's whole body seemed to sag. Her wings drooped and her tail stopped moving. "I understand. You have life waiting, colony world, new beginning. I don't want to leave you. These past days have been the happiest I've felt since losing my farm. But I don't have a choice. The ticket is paid for. The council expects me to take my assigned place in the colony. I know about no choice, about being assigned, about others deciding future." They stood in silence for a long moment. Then the door opened and Commander Brace entered the cell. Ruth started in surprise. The commander had never come into the cell before, always watching from the observation deck. Brace walked toward them, with all four hands held out in a gesture Ruth had learned meant peaceful intentions. He stopped a respectful distance away. "I have been authorized by the council to make an offer," Brace said formally. "Ruth of Earth, you have accomplished what no trainer across dozens of species could achieve. You have formed a bond with Stormwing 73 Alpha Prime. The council wishes to offer you a position in the Rider Corps. You would stay at High Peak Station as Storm's permanent partner." Ruth felt hope leap in her chest, then just as quickly die. What would that mean for Storm? Would she have to follow orders? Fly missions she doesn't want? She would be assigned to you. You would be assigned missions. This is how the Corps operates. Assigned. Like property. Like equipment. Brace's face showed confusion. She would have the best care, the finest food, regular flight time. This is the highest honor a Stormwing can receive. Ruth looked at Storm. What do you think? Do you want me to accept? Storm's response came through the translator, clear and firm. No. Not as property, not as a signed thing. This not partnership. This new cage with familiar face. Ruth turned back to Brace. I refuse the offer. Storm and I won't be part of a system that treats her as equipment, even very valuable equipment. Brace's forearms crossed over his chest. You would throw away this opportunity? You could have status, income, purpose. Instead, you choose to be farmer on some colony world you never wanted. I choose to honor Storm's wishes. She deserves to make her own decisions about her life. That is not how the galaxy works. Then maybe the galaxy needs to work differently. Brace stared at Ruth for a long moment. Then he did something unexpected. He laughed, a deep rumbling sound that came from all four lungs. You are either very wise or very foolish. I cannot decide which. But you have given me much to think about. The council will not be pleased with your answer. They expected you to jump at this chance. The council can be disappointed. I'm used to disappointing people with power. After Brace left, Ruth and Storm spent their remaining hours talking about everything and nothing. When the time finally came for Ruth to leave, they did not say goodbye. Storm touched her snout gently to Ruth's forehead. You showed me that being tame and being broken are different things, Storm said. I will remember always. I'll remember too. Every day. I promise. Ruth walked out of the cell for the last time, tears running down her face. Behind her, Storm watched until the door closed, then raised her head and sang a song that shook the station walls with its sorrow and beauty. Ruth spent her last night on High Peak Station, staring at the ceiling of the passenger quarters, unable to sleep. Around her, the other colonists breathed in the deep rhythms of sleep. Tomorrow they would board the transport and continue toward their assigned futures. Ruth would become just another farmer on a world she had never wanted to see, and Storm would remain in her cell, waiting for handlers who would never understand her. Everything felt wrong. When the wake-up lights activated, Ruth dressed mechanically and gathered her single bag. The other passengers chatted excitedly about finally continuing their journey. Ruth said nothing. They filed through the corridors toward the docking bay where their transport waited. Ruth walked slowly, letting others pass her. She wanted to remember every detail of this station, holding on to the memory of the only place where she had felt truly needed. Ruth of Earth? Stop, please. She turned to find Commander Brace striding toward her with unusual urgency. His forearms gestured rapidly, the way Pip had told her meant strong emotions. Come with me, quickly, something has happened. Ruth followed him away from the passenger group, through service corridors she had not seen before. They moved deeper into the station until they reached a conference room with a massive holographic display showing the Council of United Species. Dozens of alien faces looked out from the projection, representing governments from across the galaxy. Sit, Brace commanded, gesturing to a chair. Ruth sat, confused and worried. What's going on? Did something happen to Storm? The Stormwing is fine. You are here because the Council wishes to speak with you directly. I will translate when needed, but your translation earpiece should handle most languages. One of the Council members, a being that looked like living crystal, spoke first. The translator rendered it in English. Ruth of Earth, we have reviewed all recordings of your interactions with Stormwing 73 Alpha Prime. Your methods are highly unusual. Explain your process. Ruth felt dozens of alien eyes watching her. I don't have a process. I just talked to her. Treated her like a person instead of an animal. This achieved what professional trainers could not. Why? Because she is a person, not a vehicle or a tool. When I asked her permission and thanked her for her time, she responded because nobody had ever done that before. She's been treated like property her whole life. I treated her like she mattered. A different council member spoke, this one resembling a large insect. You refused our offer to join the Rider Corps. This decision seems irrational. Explain. Storm didn't want to be assigned to missions like equipment. She wanted the freedom to choose. I couldn't accept a position that would take away her choices, even if staying with her was what I wanted more than anything. The crystal being leaned forward. You put the Stormwing's preferences above your own welfare? Yes, because friendship means respecting what the other person wants, not just what you want. Silence filled the room. The council members looked at each other, having what must have been a private conversation through channels Ruth could not hear. Finally, a third representative spoke, a being covered in beautiful feathers. "We have a proposal, but first you must understand context. Stormwings are rare and valuable. Only 300 remain in captivity. Wild populations are nearly extinct due to hunting and habitat loss. Our breeding program keeps the species alive, but success rates are poor. Most stormwings refuse to breed. Many become violent. Some die from what we can only call despair. Your interaction with 7-3 Alpha Prime suggests we have been approaching this incorrectly." Ruth listened carefully, afraid to hope. The feathered being continued. "We propose a new experimental program. Stormwings would be granted citizen status instead of property status. They would have rights, including the right to refuse work, to choose partners, to negotiate terms. Riders would be partners, not masters. The first trial of this program would pair you with 7-3 Alpha Prime, but both of you would need to agree to all missions and terms." Ruth's heart pounded. Storm would have real freedom? Real choices? Within practical limits, yes. She could not, for example, leave the station unsupervised, as Stormwings require specialized environments and resources, but she would have autonomy over her daily life and work. What about the other Stormwings? Would they get the same rights? If the trial succeeds, the program would expand to all Stormwings in council care. Your partnership would be the model. Ruth stood up, barely able to contain her excitement. "I need to talk to Storm first. This has to be her decision as much as mine." "Can I see her before I answer?" Commander Brace spoke up. "The transport left 10 minutes ago. You were removed from the passenger manifest this morning on council authority. You are no longer assigned to the colony world. Your future is now unwritten." Ruth ran. She sprinted through the corridors with Brace shouting directions behind her. Workers jumped out of her way as she raced toward the breeding cells. She burst into the observation deck and slammed her hand on the door control. The cell door opened and Ruth stumbled through, out of breath. Storm stood in the center of the chamber, head high as if she had been waiting. "Storm, the council wants to change everything. They want to give you citizen rights, real choices. But only if you want to partner with me. Not as rider and mount, but as equals working together. You can say no. You should say no if that's not what you want. But if you say yes, we could stay together and maybe change things for all your people." Storm walked forward until she stood directly in front of Ruth. "You ran here. You could barely breathe. Why?" "Because I needed you to know that you get to decide. Your choice matters. Nobody is going to force you into anything ever again if I have any say in it. You choose to fight for my freedom even knowing I might choose to refuse you? Of course. That's what freedom means." Storm lowered her head until her eyes were level with Ruth's. "I choose yes. I choose partnership. I choose you, Ruth of Earth, because you chose me first when nobody else saw me as worth choosing." Ruth threw her arms around Storm's massive neck, tears streaming down her face. "We're going to change everything. Together." "Together," Storm agreed. In the observation deck, Commander Brace watched the reunion and spoke into his communicator. "Council, the trial program is accepted by both parties. Prepare the new contracts, and someone notify the breeding cells across all stations. Things are about to change." The holographic council chamber erupted in discussion, some voices angry, others excited. But the decision was made. For the first time in galactic history, a Stormwing would have the right to say no. 6 months transformed High Peak Station from a breeding facility into something resembling a community. The changes started small but spread like ripples across water, touching everything they reached. Ruth stood in what used to be Storm's cell but was now simply Storm's residence, a space the dragon had decorated with carvings on the walls telling stories in her own language. The door stayed open unless Storm wanted privacy. That simple detail, the unlocked door, meant more than any contract or official declaration. Today they had a mission request, their 7th since the partnership program began. Ruth read the details on her portable screen while Storm listened. "There's a damaged colony transport near the outer rim. Engine failure. They're drifting but stable. Normal rescue ships would take 3 weeks to reach them. With you flying, we could be there in 5 days. They're asking specifically for us." Storm tilted her head, considering. "Risk level? Low to moderate. The space is stable, no debris fields or hostile territory. The main danger is the distance. Long flight even for you. And if I say no, then we say no. They'll send conventional rescue. Those people will be fine, just stuck in space for longer." Storm walked to the open doorway and looked out at the main flight chamber, now shared by 6 other Stormwings who had come from other stations to join the pilot program. Each had bonded with a partner from various species. Not all were human, though humans made up the majority. Something about Earth culture made the transition easier. "I wish to accept," Storm said, "but I want rest day after return. Full day, no obligations. Deal. I'll tell them we accept on those terms." Ruth sent the confirmation and felt the familiar excitement that came before a mission. They had rescued stranded miners, delivered emergency medical supplies, and even helped evacuate a research station before a solar flare. Each success proved the partnership model worked. Pip appeared in the doorway, now wearing a coordinator's uniform instead of a tech worker's jumpsuit. "Hey, you two ready for the briefing? The other teams want to wish you well before you leave." They followed Pip to the main briefing room where 5 other Dragon Rider pairs waited. Each partnership was unique. Rita, a Quillen pilot, flew with a green Stormwing named Gale. David, quiet and thoughtful, partnered with Swift, a smaller dragon who excelled at precision flying. The others were equally diverse in species and personality, but all shared one thing: mutual respect. "Long flight," Rita said, her forearms crossed in concern. 5 days there, 5 days back. That's rough. "Storm says she can handle it," Ruth replied, "and I trust her judgment about her own limits." "That's the difference," David added. "Before, dragons flew until they collapsed because they had no choice. Now they tell us when they need to stop. Turns out they can actually fly longer when they control the pace." Commander Brace entered the room and everyone stood in respect. The commander had become one of the program's strongest advocates after seeing the results firsthand. "Quick briefing," Brace said. "The transport has 200 passengers, mostly families. They're scared but safe for now. Your job is to get there fast and guide them to the nearest station. Ruth, you'll use Storm's communication array to link their navigation systems. Storm, you'll need to pace yourself. This is the longest flight any Stormwing has attempted in the partnership program." "Understood," Storm said through the translator. Her voice no longer surprised anyone. All the partnered Stormwings spoke freely now. After the briefing, Ruth and Storm prepared their supplies. Unlike the old days where dragons carried massive saddles and equipment, they traveled light. Ruth wore a specialized suit that provided life support in space. Storm needed nothing except the natural abilities her species had evolved over millions of years. They left High Peak Station at dawn cycle, Storm launching from the main hangar into open space. Ruth felt the familiar thrill as the station fell away behind them, and the galaxy opened up ahead. No walls, no limits, just endless possibility. They flew in comfortable silence for the first day, Storm maintaining a steady pace that ate up the distance without exhausting her. Ruth monitored their course and handled the few communications that came through. Mostly she just enjoyed the view and the feeling of Storm's powerful wings beating in the rhythm she had come to know so well. On the 3rd day, they passed a wild Stormwing family hunting near an asteroid cluster. Storm slowed, watching her wild cousins with longing. The family noticed them and called out in the Stormwing language, sounds the translator could not fully capture. "Do you regret staying with me?" Ruth asked quietly. "When you see them free like that?" "I regret that all Stormwings are not free to choose," Storm replied. "But I do not regret my choice. Freedom without purpose is lonely. Partnership with purpose brings joy. I have both now." They reached the damaged transport on schedule. The passengers cheered when they saw Storm approaching, this massive dragon appearing out of the darkness like a legend come to life. Ruth established the communication link and talked the transport's engineer through connecting their systems to Storm's navigation array. The journey back took 6 days instead of 5 because Storm needed extra rest, and Ruth refused to push her. They stopped at an empty moon and camped for an extra day, Ruth sleeping in her suit while Storm rested in the thin atmosphere. When they finally returned to High Peak Station, everyone celebrated their success. But Ruth noticed something that mattered more than the celebration. She saw the other Stormwings watching Storm with admiration. She saw dragons who had been broken and silent learning to speak again. She saw partnerships forming based on trust instead of force. That night, Ruth sat with Storm in her residence while the dragon carved a new story into the wall. This one showed a small human figure and a large dragon flying together through stars. "What will you call this story?" Ruth asked. Storm stepped back to admire her work. "The beginning of choice. Because that is what we started here. Not the end of captivity, but the beginning of choice. All good things start with choice. Ruth smiled and leaned against Storm's warm side. And sometimes all it takes is one simple word to start a revolution. What word? Please. Storm made a sound that the translator rendered as laughter. Such a small word for such a big change. The best things usually are. Outside, another transport arrived carrying more storm wings from distant stations, coming to join the program. Each would have the chance Storm had been given, to choose their path, to speak their truth, to be seen as people instead of property. The revolution had begun with a whisper, but it would echo across the galaxy for generations to come. Ruth closed her eyes and felt Storm's steady breathing, the gentle rise and fall of her massive chest. Tomorrow they would train new partners, teaching others what they had learned. But tonight they simply existed together in peaceful silence. Two friends who had found each other in the most unlikely place and changed everything by refusing to accept the world as it was. The untamable dragon had never needed taming. She had only needed someone to ask permission, to say please, to see her as worthy of respect. And the human who could not save her own farm had somehow saved an entire species by understanding one simple truth. Freedom given is always stronger than freedom taken. Together, they had proven that the smallest acts of kindness could reshape the galaxy, one choice at a time.